All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're going to talk about something that's, pretty dark but really important: the actual mechanics of destructive cults. We're going to break down the systematic playbook these groups use to take something we all look for, a search for meaning, and twist it into a powerful tool of control. And that really is the central, chilling question, isn't it? I mean, you look at the stories from the jungles of Guyana to a mansion in California, and they so often start with these big promises of enlightenment, community, and purpose. But then they end in complete tragedy. How does that happen? How does that switch get flipped? Well, that's what we're here to figure out. So, right up front, we have to draw a very, very clear line here. This isn't about judging what people believe. It doesn't matter if it's aliens, a new self-help system, or a specific religious text. Our focus is on the methods, the techniques used to control people using that belief. And most experts have landed on a definition that looks something like this. The keywords here are deception and coercion. It's all about the behavior of the group, not the belief itself. A group crosses that line when it starts to systematically dismantle a person's ability to think for themselves, usually for the leader's own gain. So the big takeaway is this: it's not what they believe, it's how they're made to believe it. So how exactly is this control built? Well, it turns out there's a shockingly consistent blueprint. We're going to walk through a kind of psychological playbook that shows up again and again in these groups, no matter what their specific ideology is. And the person who really cracked this code was psychiatrist Robert J. Lifton. See, after he studied survivors of Chinese thought reform programs, what people used to call brainwashing, he noticed a pattern. He identified a set of 8 psychological themes that were always present in environments that exert this kind of extreme control over people. And here they are. These 8 points are basically the recipe for thought reform. From controlling every aspect of someone's environment to creating a special insider language, each step is designed to slowly and systematically replace a person's own identity with the group's. Let's break down a couple of the most powerful ones. First up, and this is the absolute foundation, is milieu control. This is all about controlling a person's entire world, what they see, who they're allowed to talk to, the information they get. I mean, the most extreme example has to be Jim Jones moving his followers to Jonestown, a totally remote jungle settlement in Guyana. He literally cut them off from the rest of the world, from their families, and from any chance of hearing a dissenting opinion. Next, you build on that with something called loading the language. And this is it's insidious, but it's brilliant. The group creates its own jargon, simple, catchy phrases that act as thought-terminating cliches. So if you have a simple slogan to shut down every complex doubt, you eventually just stop doubting. It's a way to police thought itself before it can even get started. And this is a perfect example of another point: sacred science. Look at a modern group like NXIVM. They didn't call their beliefs a religion, no way. It was a sacred science called rational inquiry. By framing it as this flawless scientific path to self-improvement, they made it unquestionable. Any criticism wasn't just wrong, it was irrational. It was a personal failure on the part of the member. Okay, so that's the theory. Now let's see how this playbook actually gets used in the real world. Because when you start looking at some of the most infamous groups in history, you'll see these same patterns of coercion pop up, even when their beliefs are wildly different. Just look at the variety on this chart for a second. It's kind of wild, right? You've got social justice, UFO spirituality, executive coaching, yoga and wellness. The public-facing recruitment fronts couldn't be more different, but the underlying mechanics of control, almost identical. And the outcomes? Well, as you can see, they were all devastating. Let's start with the one that, for a lot of people, really defines the word cult: the People's Temple. It began with this really noble cause: racial integration, social justice, and it attracted thousands of idealistic people. But it slowly devolved into this paranoid, isolated mini-state completely controlled by one man, Jim Jones. This is the number that just burned Jonestown into our collective memory. On November 18, 1978, after a U.S. congressman flew down to investigate claims of abuse and was then murdered on the airstrip, Jim Jones ordered his followers to commit what he called revolutionary suicide. 918 people, including more than 200 children, died drinking cyanide-blazed punch. Now, let's jump forward to the 1990s and the dawn of the internet. Heaven's Gate was a UFO cult that actually used the web to find new members. They taught that the Earth was about to be recycled, and their only chance to survive was to shed their human vessels and ascend.
And the details here are they're haunting. They genuinely believed a spaceship was hiding in the tail of the Hale-Bopp comet. And to get to it, 39 members took their own lives in a rented mansion. The scene itself just showed the incredible level of control. They were all found in identical black tracksuits with brand new Nikes on and exactly $5.75 in their pockets. Every single detail was orchestrated.
So this brings us right back to that big question. Why? Why would anyone surrender their life so completely? It's really easy for us to sit back and dismiss the members as weak or foolish, but the psychology behind it is so much more complex and, honestly, so much more human. Okay, let's just get this myth right off the table. Experts are very clear on this. Cult members are not inherently weak-minded. Instead, what these groups are masters at is targeting people during moments of vulnerability. After a bad breakup, losing a job, moving to a new city, they find people who are already searching for answers, for a community. And they reel them in with a tactic called love bombing. I want you to imagine you're feeling lost. And then all of a sudden, you find this group of people who think you are the most incredible, brilliant person they have ever met. They shower you with praise, with affection. It feels like you finally come home. This overwhelming positivity is what gets you hooked, and it bypasses your critical thinking long before the real control tactics are slowly introduced. Now, once someone's in, and they've invested their time, their money, their entire identity, it becomes incredibly difficult to leave. This is because of something called cognitive dissonance. When the harsh reality of the group starts to clash with all those lofty promises, it's actually psychologically easier to double down and believe even harder than it is to admit to yourself that you made a huge, terrible mistake. It explains why followers will stay even after prophecies fail over and over again. The core principles of this playbook, they're timeless, but the way they're delivered? That has evolved dramatically. The isolated general compound of the 1970s has given way to something way more accessible and, in some ways, way more dangerous. This timeline really says it all, doesn't it? The core principle of milieu control, controlling the environment, it hasn't changed a bit. In the 70s, you needed physical isolation. By the 90s, Heaven's Gate proved you could do it from a suburban house with a dial-up modem. And today, a group like ALAF, the successor to the cult that gassed the Tokyo subway, finds new recruits inside digital ecosystems and social media filter bubbles. And here is the most crucial point. The technology changes, but the psychology stays exactly the same. The playbook of isolation, of loaded language, of demanding purity, all the stuff that worked in a remote jungle can now be deployed through a smartphone, targeting anyone, anywhere in the world. And that leaves us with one last big thought. These tactics we've talked about, they haven't gone away. They've just gone online. They've moved from the compound to the cloud. Understanding this playbook is the first step in being able to recognize it. So the real question is, now that you know the patterns, how will you spot it out in the wild?